These are disorienting times for those of us in the business of covering and practicing politics. The old indicators don't seem to work anymore. Every election seems to bring another surprise. It's easy to feel a bit lost. It feels a bit like the instruments, the instincts we've used for decades to navigate the political landscape are broken or obsolete. Has politics changed in some profound way that many of us have yet to fully grasp? Or have we just been through a series of freak political storms that will soon blow over? For me, the challenge facing the media and political establishments was brought home rather brutally and quite literally by my 18-year-old daughter the morning after the election. Remind me what you told me the day after the election.
I'm not going to believe anything you ever say about politics ever again because you've got everything wrong.
Fortunately, I wasn't the only one feeling a little sheepish when Big Ben struck 10 p.m. on June the 8th.
And what we're saying is the Conservatives are the largest party. Note, they don't have an overall majority at this stage.
Oh, my jaw dropped. There was a little cry of despair and my head hit the table.
I nearly swerved off the road.
Were you driving at the time?
I was driving at the time.
You can't rule anything out in today's politics.
When you've been wrong about something, it's always a good idea to go looking for someone who's been, well, wronger. When it comes to the 2017 election, the highly respected pollster Martin Boone got it spectacularly wrong. In its eve of election poll, his company, ICM, predicted a 12-point Tory win. That's 10 points more than they achieved.
We were bamboozled by the turnout, which we predicted wouldn't happen in the way it did. And I have to hold up my hands and say that, you know, I made a call and it was the wrong call and the result was a poor poll performance.
Why would anyone take the poll seriously again?
It's a very good question, you know, and we have to move things on. The problem for me is that the techniques which didn't work in 2015, i.e. we undershot the Labour score, as historically we've done as pollsters going back almost forever, did work in 2017. And indeed the techniques which the likes of me and I applied in 2017 wouldn't have worked retrospectively in 2015.
If you were in the studio and you were a politician or a CEO of a company which had failed in this way, we'd be saying, are you thinking of resigning? Have you?
I thought about resigning publicly after 2015 actually. I openly considered whether it was worthwhile subjecting my company ICM to the brickbats of misfortune associated with this. We, ICM, and we in industry do need to seriously think about whether classical orthodox polling techniques are something that we want to continue doing.
Another person on the long list of those admitting, through somewhat gritted teeth, that they underestimated Corbyn is the MP Jess Phillips. Back in April, she said Corbyn staying on as party leader would be the ultimate selfish act.
I was definitely wrong. There's no two ways about that. And do I have to reevaluate the way that I am about politics? Yes.
After shock election results, news organisations like the BBC tend to say, if only we'd listened more carefully to what was going on the ground. The trouble is, says Jess, what she was hearing was very different to what happened.
What we potentially missed in classic campaigning and classic polling, I imagine this is how they do the polling, is the people we're not talking to. And still I'm driving around my constituency thinking, did you vote for me? Did you vote for me? Like, I want to find those people and know exactly why they went out and voted Labour, because there are definitely people who'd never voted before, younger people. We just weren't talking to the right people. We always go back and talk to the Labour promise. We always talk to the same houses. You talk to the people who vote. You wouldn't waste your time in an election campaign bothering with people who have no voting record.
Someone who isn't reaching for the sackcloth and ashes just yet is ITV's political editor Robert Peston. He may not have seen the election result coming, but he can claim to have been more upbeat about Corbyn's prospects than most.
The old rules have gone, and we've got to try and make sense of how politics works. And the truthful answer is that, you know, we're all feeling our way a bit. Millions and millions of people in rich countries are saying that the way things worked in the past cannot go on, that their interests are not being served by the establishment. Now, that doesn't mean that Jeremy Corbyn definitely becomes Prime Minister, but it absolutely means that the old rules are useless in making an assessment about whether he's going to be Prime Minister.
Where were you when you heard the exit poll for last month's election?
I was at home watching the election.
Did you shed a little tear like Theresa May?
No.
The man who, perhaps more than any other, could claim to have divined the rules of modern politics was Tony Blair. His Tory successors, David Cameron and George Osborne, revered his political judgment so much they called him the Master. You've obviously reflected quite a lot over the last month on the election result. Was there anything about it which made you question what you thought you knew about politics?
Yes, in the sense that, not just this election result, but Brexit, the Trump victory in the US, you know, what's happening all over Europe.
Did you see any of the other two coming, by the way?
No.
So you've had 3 surprises.
Yeah,
I feel
exactly.
a little better.
For most of my political life, I've been saying, I think this is the right way to go, and what's more, it's the only way to win an election. I have to qualify that now. I have to say, no, I think it's possible you end up with Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister.
So you accept that he could possibly win on the platform he's on?
I think you can't rule anything out in today's politics. But it doesn't stop me believing that if we deliver Brexit and at the same time are delivering the programme that he has at the moment, unreconstructed, unchanged, we will be in for a very, very difficult time as a country. I still believe the surest route is through the centre.
But not the only way.
But I think you can't say in today's politics, particularly if you've gone through 3 things, the election of Donald Trump, Brexit, Jeremy Corbyn doing so well, and if you're in my position, you haven't got those things right, you've got to accept it's possible that that programme wins. But no, I haven't changed my basic view, and why should I? Because it's what I believe. But
that's the really interesting thing, is because the events of the last 2 years haven't challenged any of your beliefs. I mean, I find myself looking at some of these things thinking, gosh, I just don't know. I don't know what I thought I knew about politics.
Right,
but you don't. You come out thinking my beliefs still stand.
You've got to distinguish between 2 separate things. One is accepting that there's something going on in politics that you didn't get and don't fully understand. We're completely on the same line with that. I agree. That's why I'm studying it very hard. The other thing is to work out what you believe in. Look, does the fact that the British people voted for Brexit mean that I think Brexit's right? No, I think it's a disastrous mistake for the country.
Not everyone is flagellating themselves over getting yet another political event wrong. A few, like the columnist Rod Liddle, are feeling quite smug. When the election was called, he wrote that the result would probably leave us roughly where we were.
I think the Westminster commentators got the Corbyn effect wrong. Don't believe that because you might think that Jeremy Corbyn is a jackass, that everybody in the country believes he's a jackass, because quite clearly they didn't, and they didn't up north either.
A natural contrarian, Liddle's advice for reading modern politics starts with not following the herd. But even he admits his record isn't entirely unblemished.
I got Brexit wrong. I thought that, much as I voted to leave, I thought that probably in the end we'd vote Remain. So and most people thought that. So it's not
you got your own patch in Kent wrong too, didn't you?
Yeah. My wife and I changed our votes so we could vote in Middlesbrough South and East Cleveland because we knew it was marginal, and we knew Canterbury was a safe seat for the Tories, so no point voting there. No, I got Canterbury wrong. Fucking students.
Ah yes, those pesky students. Assuming they prefer to stay in watching Love Island than go out and vote is one reason we got caught out on June 8th. While he wasn't doing his finals at Nottingham University, Matt Turner was helping to run Evolve Politics, one of a handful of Corbyn-supporting websites that claim to have their fingers closer to the national pulse than the mainstream media. He's ventured into the heart of the beast to explain what he could see that we couldn't.
Sites like ours, like the Canary and Evolve Politics, had our ear to the ground, and we kind of gave a more accurate reflection of what people were actually feeling. The same could probably be said for some of the new up-and-coming right-wing press sites. People have accused us of living in a bubble when we've accurately predicted the hung parliament. If anything, I think the roles have changed. Maybe 2 years ago when we just started, we were living in a Labour supporting bubble, but we're certainly not now. You know, the week before the election, we reached 17 million people on Facebook. We had over 1 million unique hits to our site. If anything, I think it's now the Westminster media who are living in that bubble.
I'd never known an election where I saw such a gap between what was in newspapers and what people were talking about. I mean, you know, I spend way too much time on social media, but what people were talking about on social media.
There's a whole debate going on social media in different forms of people interacting with each other, particularly young people, that really doesn't hit the mainstream media at all. So that's a lesson learned.
So how should we navigate our way through this new political landscape? Acknowledging that we didn't see Jeremy Corbyn's success coming is not the same as saying that our coverage wasn't much good. In fact, there were lots of indications in Newsnight's reporting that he was doing much better than the polls suggested. The trouble is, when so many voices are saying the opposite, it's hard not to doubt the evidence in front of you.
For example, getting these enormous crowds of enthusiastic people to come and listen to him. And, you know, you would routinely be told, but of course, that's not a representative sample, probably some of it's stage managed, and, you know, there are, you know, millions and millions of voters, and these are at best a couple of thousand. The enthusiasm he was generating was real, right? And yet almost nobody believed it. And so we've just got to get better at having slightly open minds and saying, well, actually, I'm seeing something really quite extraordinary here. It's different from what we saw, you know, in previous elections. It means something.
All those journalists and pollsters left feeling disoriented after last month's result can comfort themselves with one thing. Most politicians, including those around Jeremy Corbyn, were just as surprised by it. In fact, one source told me that until minutes before the exit poll, senior Labour figures had been telling him they expected an increased Tory majority of as many as 60 seats.
In the 2 weeks before the actual day of the poll, I had been saying that Labour were going to do a hell of a lot better than most people thought. But did I think that there was going to be a hung parliament? No. No, because in the way that I do as a normal journalist, I spoke to senior Tories, spoke to senior Labour, half an hour before I got, you know, the exit poll. Labour was expecting a reasonable majority for Theresa May. The Tories were expecting a reasonable majority for Theresa May. And, you know, the big mistake I made was trusting them.
Do you think there's been an actual sort of structural forever change that we haven't quite yet got our heads around? Or do you think it's a period of sort of freakish weather and we'll come through the other side and the normal rules will apply again?
I think it's a really difficult question, and I'm not sure what the answer is. So what I'm saying is sort of work in progress in terms of my thinking. First of all, I think social media, its interaction with a polarized, fragmented, divisive, partisan, conventional media is creating a very, very divided politics in which populism of left and right can gain a foothold very easily. That's one change. Secondly, I think post the financial crisis, there is a real feeling by people that globalization just is this force that rolls on and that many people feel powerless and left behind. And that has got to be addressed. So those two things have changed. What, in my view, has not changed is that the only things that will actually work, I mean, whether people vote for them or not, by the way, is another matter. Okay, but the only things that will actually work is a modern policy agenda that will be from a centre ground position.
The fact that a man famously unencumbered by self-doubt is still struggling to make sense of the new political landscape is a measure of the uncharted territory that we have found ourselves in. Whether the terrain of politics has changed for good, or whether we've just been on an eventful detour, may be the most pressing political question of our time. Whatever the answer, you'd be sensible to ignore any political predictions for the foreseeable future. And I, for one, won't be making any.